A transitional meeting of National Cabinet. At National Cabinet tomorrow, the PM and state and territory leaders will begin talks on the future of the forum and whether or not to replace COAG with National Cabinet. They'll be looking at what form that would take, how often it would meet, and whether that forum is the right mechanism for pushing forward with reform in the economic recovery. This is being viewed as a transitional meeting where the focus goes off health and onto the economic recovery. With so much the PM wants to work on in terms of federation reform, effectively how to reshape the funding of everything from hospitals to schools between the state and federal governments, and tax reform, the National Cabinet appears the best place to do it. A short time ago, Health Minister Greg Hunt was asked about the forum and its continuation.
I hope that there is support for it from the states and the premiers and the chief ministers going forward. My personal view, looking at what's happened with health, it's allowed us to strike the private hospitals agreement, it's allowed us to strike the public hospitals agreement, it's allowed us to work with the public health units on the contact tracing. So it's actually facilitated Australia's response, and it's been an immensely important and, I hope, abiding feature.
Andrew, there has been a lot of criticism of COAG over the years. Too clunky, cumbersome, doesn't get enough done. This has been the opposite, this approach. It's been very effective, and it's good to see that the leaders are going to be discussing having that permanent replacement at this gathering tomorrow.
I think this is Scott Morrison's biggest achievement through the whole crisis. And Greg Hunt even said earlier that they'd looked at problems in the Great Depression when states split. They'd looked at problems around the same time, really, with the Spanish flu where states split. And we've even seen on the state borders this split. If you hadn't have had this mechanism to find out, to have a ruler over restrictions and how they should come off and those sort of matters, there would have been confusing different approaches from all the states, and it would have been quite the mess. And everyone involved in politics knows that it's never easy to bring state and federal leaders together. It's happened in this crisis thanks to Scott Morrison.
So significant development there on National Cabinet with that meeting looming tomorrow. Some significant interventions today from a straight-talking Governor of the Reserve Bank, Andrew.
Boy, was he straight talking, Kieran. Philip Lowe, the Governor of the Reserve Bank, he didn't hold back this morning, and you even remarked at me off air that it had been the most straight talking you'd ever heard him when he made it clear he believes there will need to be significant federal government stimulus spending after JobKeeper and the increased JobSeeker finishes in September. So we know for some time there's been these differing views between the central bank and the federal government on whether fiscal or monetary policy changes are the best way forward for the economy. Well, Lowe made clear interest rates cannot be cut anymore, and that after September there will be a need for more fiscal stimulus. Scott Morrison has made clear he wants business to lead the recovery, that he does not want to extend JobKeeper or the increased JobSeeker for any longer than he has to. There seems to be different perceptions from the federal government on one side and the states and Reserve Bank on the other on the prospects of a bounce back then. Let's hear Philip Lowe on fiscal policy and on the potential need for a JobKeeper extension.
Well, it's clearly going to be a critical point when that scheme comes to an end. It may be in 6 months' time we bounce back well and the economy is doing reasonably well, and these schemes, which were temporary in nature, can be withdrawn without problems. But if the economy is not recovered reasonably well by then, I think as part of that review we should be looking at perhaps the extension of that scheme or the modification in some way. But at this point I think it's too hard to say because the outlook remains very uncertain, but it's going to be a critical point. Right through the next year or so, I think the economy is going to need support from both monetary and fiscal policy. And there are certain risks if we withdraw that support too early. I know from the Reserve Bank's perspective we're going to keep this monetary support going for a long period of time, and I'm hopeful that the fiscal support will be there for a long period of time. If the economy picks up more quickly, then that can be withdrawn safely. But if the recovery is very drawn out, then it's going to be very important that we keep the fiscal support going. For the last 20 years, monetary policy has been the main swing instrument. We've moved interest rates up and down to manage the business cycle and keep inflation under control. In the next little while, there's not going to be very much scope at all to use monetary policy in that way, and so I think fiscal policy will have to be used.
Thank you.
That's going to require a change in mindset. Yeah.
Philip Lowe putting the wood on Scott Morrison and Josh Frydenberg there for stimulus support for another year. He also told us, or told the COVID Parliamentary Committee there, that there will not be interest rate rises for years to come.
We've been very clear we're not going to be raising interest rates until full employment is in and we're sustainably within the 2 to 3% target range. So that's the guidance we're giving, and I think it's also reasonable to expect that that will not be for some years.
And the Reserve Bank Governor, again laying the ground for tax reform, increasing GST and other compensations in other tax areas is always talked about. Have a listen.
The tax system, he didn't talk very much about that, but most of the analysis that's been done on our tax system through the various reports comes to the conclusion that it's not optimally designed for growth. The way we tax consumption, income and land is not optimal from a growth perspective.
Lowe said he was hopeful we would not end up with the 15% unemployment that had been feared, but he did not rule it out. And as we go further into debt to deal with this crisis, he spoke frankly of his fears for generations to come.
If we want to have rising incomes and our children to have better standards of living than we do, then we need to grow the economy. We need to become better at doing things, finding new ways of being more productive. So it's really about, I think in the end, delivering better standard of living for our kids, and we need to grow to do that. We're in a fast-paced world. If we do that, we'll be okay, but our kids will not have materially better standards of living than I enjoy, and that's my fundamental concern.